So the presentation is about the things that you buy and the workers who work to make the things you buy. And what I'm talking about is primarily simple things. We're going to focus on chocolate and we're going to focus on clothing. But it's also trinkets and toys and coffee and the more simple things that people make for you. They make them in the developing world, and the working conditions for people in the developing world that make those kinds of things are, in my opinion, awful. By the way, I'm happy to be here. If I get too serious, it's probably because I'm too serious.
Do you want me to do the PowerPoint for you, Jerry?
That may help, but let's see.
That way you don't have to worry about it, you can just talk.
Okay, so here's what I mean more specifically about that. I mean that a large percentage of the items that are made by workers work under very poor working conditions, and the categories are on the screen. This slide is going to come up over and over again, maybe 3 or 4 times in the presentation. Pay, long hours, abusive supervision, unsafe conditions, underage workers, and yes, slaves. So we're going to start with chocolate. And the next one, not this one, the next one. Okay, so if you want to start playing that movie.
Each year, 200,000 to 300,000 children are sold into slavery. Kids can be sold by their parents for as little as $14. Chocolate is a luxury all over the world. Kids, adults, almost everybody loves it. What most people don't know is that the delicious delicacy you can find on shelves, in stores, all over begins with starved and beaten children harvesting cocoa beans day and night in Africa. The chocolate industry is a billion-dollar industry, and some of the world's best-known chocolate production brands have been found to have child labor and trafficking. 75% of the world's cocoa supply comes from 2 countries in West Africa, Ghana and the Ivory Coast. There are 1.8 million children in Ghana and the Ivory Coast working in the chocolate industry.
Other times, kids are abducted from Burkina Faso, Mali, and other surrounding countries. Most farmers who have turned to the cruel ways of child slavery barely had enough money to make a living. They turn to slavery to stay in business. Most children who become slaves are either sold, abducted, or believe that they are working for pay, which should be sent back to their family, but it is all just a lie. The majority of child slavery in Africa begins with families who do not have enough to provide for their children or themselves.
Although sometimes as a selfish act to receive payment, the parents trick their kids into believing they are being sent away for a better life, maybe to go to school or to live with an aunt or uncle.
Other times it is the parents who are being deceived. Traffickers, who are often known by the family, tell the parents that their child will be taken away to a better place where they will have plenty of food and a roof over their heads, and any mother would do anything for her child to have a full belly, even if it means sending them away.
Most children who work on the cocoa farms range from ages 7 to 18 and can work there for their entire lives. Workdays of the children begin early in the morning and end late into the night. They have to climb trees where they use large machetes to cut down the cocoa pods from the trees. After this, the pods are piled into bags and carried back through the forest. At times, the bags can be much heavier and bigger than the children, weighing them down so they cannot continue on, resulting in beatings. Once the kids return from the forest with the beans, they then begin the next step in the process. This is extremely dangerous for the children of such young ages, but they do not have a choice. They use their machetes to strike the beans and pop them open to reveal the inside of the beans. They may cut their arms and legs during this process or even be exposed to hazardous chemicals like pesticides. They are scared mentally and physically. The living conditions of these working children is horrible. In this video, you will see a young child slave named Abdul. He's been working here on this plantation in Burkina Faso for a very long time. Supposedly, Abdul is only 10 years old, but he looks much younger.
Put in the simplest of terms, Abdul is a child slave. We move away from the group so he can speak more freely, and through our translator, he tells us his story.
If he had a choice, he wouldn't work.
Abdul says he's from neighboring Burkina Faso. When his father died, he says, a stranger brought him to Ivory Coast. Abdul has never eaten chocolate. Tells us he doesn't even know what cocoa is for.
As the investigators take a closer look, Abdul shows them all his beatings, scars, and wounds.
Okay, so I'm not sure that it's clear that these kids had scratches and cuts on their arms and stuff like that. So they do get wounded from doing this. So I want to make that clear. The kids were either kidnapped, and some are, but more often they were bribed to go to these places, or their parents were bribed, meaning they were promised money, and the parents would get money for sending their kids with the assurances that the kids would get paid, and they're not. They have to work hard. Yes, they get fed, not much, but they get fed enough so they can work. They're abused if they don't work hard. Movie says that many of them stay there their entire lives. I'm aware of many situations where kids escape, and I have no idea what percentage are able to escape. Estimates are between 15,000 and 1.6 million kids wind up in situations like that. Now that's an incredibly wide discrepancy. So once again, we don't know exactly what the figures are, but figure it's hundreds of thousands. I'd estimate, and this is an estimate, but I think it's fairly, I'm kind of involved enough to know, but I can't be sure, that between 5 and 25 to 30% of the chocolate that you eat, the cocoa is picked by slaves. And I'll get to, let's just do it this way. Same slide as before. Low pay, sometimes nothing. Long hours, yes. Abusive supervision, likely. Unsafe conditions, yes. Underage workers, obviously. Slave labor, yes. So there are things that you can do, that we as consumers can do. Primarily buy brands that are fair trade chocolate. And they have an emblem, and I'll show you the emblem in a couple of minutes. Every bar of chocolate handed out to you is fair trade. Most of the chocolate, however, that we eat in this country is not fair trade. Somewhere between 5 and 10% is. And my best example is Nestle's. Nestle's is a Switzerland-based company. You've all heard the brand. In Great Britain, 100% of all of Nestle's chocolate is fair trade. In this country, 0. So as far as what you can do, you can eat fair trade. You can also eat or partake of companies or brands that say they're what they make is made of fair trade chocolate. Ben & Jerry's is the best example. How many of you not heard of Ben & Jerry's? Okay, so we all know it's expensive and it tastes wonderful, and some of the expense is based on the fact that it's fair trade. So there's a website, fair trade label, you can do day-to-day. Oh, no, this is fair trade itself. I'm sorry. The website is from this. You go to fairtradeusa.org, search for products and partners, click cocoa, and you can find fair trade chocolate. So this is fair trade. I represent fair trade. Now, I'm trying to minimize my representation of the company. It doesn't make any difference. What I really want you to do is understand sweatshops and how integral they are to making the stuff that you have. And that's my point. I'm not selling fair trade exactly per se. But those, when you do find a fair trade item, it's going to have one of these emblems on it. Fair trade industries, primarily these four. And by trinkets and gifts, I mean containers, I mean jewelry, I mean decorations, I mean the kinds of things that people buy for each other for Christmas. So most of the fair trade stores, how many of you are familiar with fair trade stores? Okay, they exist, and one of the handouts has lots of stores that are fair trade in southeast Wisconsin. But when you go to a fair trade store, you find things like jewelry and decorations and not always clothing, but accessories and stuff like that. But there is also fair trade chocolate and fair trade coffee. And fair trade tech, but only one brand. Most of the components of most computers are probably made under pretty poor working conditions in the developing world. This year, Apple decided that that would be no longer true for any of its items. So if you have a cell phone, an Apple cell phone bought this year, and by the way, it's probably even in the recent past. So they've gradually made the change. Fair trade comes, they've worked with fair trade. When they reach a certain criteria, fair trade says, okay, emblem goes to fair trade. Apple is fair trade. And it's a big win for us. Anyway, so fair trade, Apple is different. And I next want to go to fashion. Now before I do that, I want to do an exercise, and it takes your cooperation. And if you're uncomfortable with this exercise, please raise your hand. Because I'm going to ask the people behind you to look at the label of your sweatshirt or shirt. That's all, no more than that. How uncomfortable, or somebody next to you, how uncomfortable are you with that? Anybody, please, if you're uncomfortable, okay. So find somebody, look at your label, show it to somebody. I can't do that because of the microphone. So you can see I'm fair trade. Somebody want to look at mine? Both shirts.
So am I looking for where it's made?
Yeah, where it's made.
Made in, what is that country?
I don't know.
Sri Lanka?
Oh, Sri Lanka. Okay, what about the other one? The other one is Mexico, and it's got another label.
Yeah, this one's Mexico.
And it says something else. It says worker owned.
Worker owned.
Okay. So I don't know if you can identify the countries. How many of you know for sure that the shirt that you saw, the label, is made in Africa? Okay, how about Asia? China? That China counts as Asia. Where? Shanghai? I don't know. Okay. I'm not even sure I know what that is. How many in Latin America? Okay, a couple. What country? Haiti? That's okay. Caribbean? Okay. Central America? Okay. Honduras? Okay. So lots of places made in poor countries in Central America, lots in Asia, lots in Africa. My T-shirt was made in Mexico, but it says something else. It said worker owned. It means that workers own the company. By the way, this is a fair trade shirt. It better be that. That workers own the company, and that obviously the working conditions are going to be okay for those people. Okay, so this next movie is going to be about a fire. And it's the Rana Plaza fire, Bangladesh, 2012. How many are familiar with it? 1, 2.
I started the day normally like other days. Immediately I take my camera and get there. I suddenly felt, am I in a war zone? I was hearing the scream from the rubble, someone saying, chop off my leg and pull me out. I stopped shooting. I was trying to help. Around 7:30, two volunteer workers called me and showed me two dead bodies under the rubble. I saw the bodies kind of huddle each other, holding each other to survive. I started shooting again. I felt like these images should be the voice of these people who died. No one knows their story, how they survive making these clothes for first world country. There's no question the contribution of garment industry in Bangladesh in the economy, but it needs more good rules and regulation. I see the brand names all the time. The tags remind me the tags I have seen in Rana Plaza collapse. People don't want to pay more. So if you don't want to pay more, how the producer would pay more to the worker? So it's like the chain, you know, start from the consumer and ends to the labor, you know. Still, a lot of people are missing. They didn't find their bodies. Somebody lost 2 daughters, 2 sons, husband, wife, both. Who will take their responsibility?
Okay, so it was a big fire, and there were smaller fires in the months previous. There was one probably a year before this fire where about 100 people's lives were lost. This building's gone down more than once. And there were some indications that it was ready to go again. The workers saw cracks in the walls. What happens is, with cracks in the walls, air gets through. That means the burning goes more quickly. Burning goes more quickly. Walls cave in more quickly, and people can't get out. So this was an accident waiting to happen. I'll need to say right now that, believe me, in Bangladesh, there's laws that are going to prevent this from happening again. They're not that dumb. But this kind of thing can happen in the developing world. So I'll go back to my slide. Low pay, and I'll go into that in a little bit more detail, not so bad. But long hours for these people, we're talking 12 hours minimum a day, 6 days a week, sometimes 7. Overtime is arbitrary. It's arbitrary, it's mandatory. Boss says you do overtime, you do overtime. You don't have a choice. Abusive supervision, yes. Unsafe conditions, obviously. Underage workers, yes. Slaves, less likely. This is not the chocolate industry. It's not as bad. It's not as dangerous. But this is not fun. These are not jobs that you would choose. Okay, so it says that in Bangladesh, government workers make $68 a month. We all know that that cannot sustain us in this country. But Bangladesh prices are cheaper. And the fact is that in the developing world, people live in multi-generation homes. By that I mean that kids live with their parents, their grandparents, and maybe their great-grandparents. So if you have 2 or 3 people making this much money in a Bangladesh household, chances are everybody eats fine, not the way you eat, but decent. And there might be enough money left over for a water filter, that means the water is good, and possibly electricity. So if there is some machine in the house that can get the internet, they can get it. They might be able to get TV. It's not the end of the world. Not the way It's not as good as the way the poorest people in this country live, but it isn't so awful financially. Nevertheless, like I said, it's not a job any of us want. Not safe conditions, just it's not good. All right, so the premise of this, or one of the premises of this talk, is that we as consumers are responsible for this situation. Why? Because we buy so much from developing country places where the working conditions are lousy. Especially clothes. Clothes are cheap, so we buy a lot. Brands compete on price and trendiness, so we buy a lot. Brands keep prices low to encourage us to buy a lot. But to keep prices low, brands must save expenses. And by the way, as we go, well, let me just keep it at that. It's on the slide, or on the slide that I had, so I want to be sure that I say it. Most of you know who John Oliver is. John Oliver has a YouTube on this particular issue. I think it's called Fast Fashion. So all you have to do is do YouTube, Fast Fashion, and you'll find it. It's funny. It's a lot funnier than mine, but it makes some of the same points. Anyway, brands keep their prices low on the backs of which of the below? Salaries of brand executives. Is that one of the things that happens? Do they drop as brands keep prices low? The profits of retail stores, do those go down as prices stay low? Or do the profits of clothing manufacturers, the factories that are inside the sweatshop, inside the you know what I'm talking about, I think, the companies that own the sweatshops, do those prices go down, or their profits go down? Or does the sweatshop workers somehow take the loss? And I stated it just as it's obvious. Output increases, even the technology will improve in the sweatshops, but the working conditions will not, and the salaries will not. Since we buy so much is that it's cheap and trendy, we support the model. The brands buy from, demand cheapness from the sweatshops. That means poor work, and the sweatshops will not improve the conditions for workers. If we choose to buy less, and that's what I'm advocating, or change our buying habits, we stop supporting the model. I hope that's clear. I hope that's obvious. Because if it's not obvious, then I'm not coming across, and I guess if somehow deliver the feedback that isn't clear, so I can change my talk. The best and easiest answer for what you can do is to make different choices. Buy a brand that does not use sweatshops, and that often means research, but it often means something that, especially for very casual wear, the sweatshirts and the t-shirts that you have, you can buy them made in America. I'm pretty sure on my handout there are made in America websites. When you buy made in America, you're getting better working conditions. You're getting people, because we have regulations, working conditions in this country are just better. And there's some outlets are union made, which means people make decent wages as well. Even buying less clothes sends a message to brands that use sweatshops that the sweatshop model doesn't work anymore. In other words, if you make different choices, they get less business, and they have to figure out how to change. They might even change in the direction of being better to workers. Is that for sure? Of course not. But we want to get this system feeling tentative, feeling less confident. So here's some of the specifics. Often it means getting into the second-hand clothes market. That's not so terrible. Some stuff is nice in second-hand stores. Gets recycled, do good things for the environment, but you also disrupt this model. So this is more specific. Key websites, and this is on your handout. It's called thegoodtrade.com. And for anything that you want to buy, if you use goodtrade.com, and then it'll tell you, decide what category, you can find outlets. Mostly on the web, but sometimes local. And what I did, and it's on your website, is I just went on Google and said, okay, fair trade, Southeast Wisconsin. And about 30 or 40 different outlets came up. Mostly in Madison, mostly in Milwaukee, but a couple in Kenosha, and I think I saw one in Sheboygan and stuff like that. Places like that. Okay, just to get specific, not that it matters a lot, but the places where fair trade stuff is made is all over the world. And I've been to India a couple of times, and I've seen one fair trade shop in India, and the conditions are fine. People work, they get paid per item. And they work as fast as they want to work. And they work with no supervision. They just do what they do. Yes, they're inspected. They have to do good stuff. They come in when they want. They leave when they want. Okay, so that's my pitch to consumers, and I've got 7 or 8 minutes. Most of you are business students. And what I'd like to do for the next little while is talk about what you can learn that might help you 7 or 8 years down the road when you're executives. So, and the way I do it is what's going on today, and maybe we can extract that into the future. So what if you're a purchaser? Well, it turns out that every company on that list purchases fair trade. And brags about it. Now, I included Marks and Spencer because I just really like the company. It's, for those of you who've been to the British Isles, they have Marks and Spencer all over the place. They're a very ethical company. It's a huge, huge, successful department store. But I also included Spectrum, which is Rayovac Batteries, headquartered in Madison, and a Chicago company that makes foods. They all try very hard to buy fair trade. So if those companies can do it, if you become a purchasing executive, you might try to search ways to deal with vendors to buy more ethical, less sweatshop-oriented purchases. I'll give you an example of that too. Without fair trade, both Chicago and Cook County passed ordinances that are anti-sweatshop, so that vendors of uniforms and other garments have to demonstrate they do not violate labor laws. No child labor, wages must be paid, safe working conditions. They have to verify that before Chicago or Cook County will sign a contract. It's another way that you as a purchasing agent might be able to get better working conditions for people in the developing world, and you're on the good side of things, if you will. Again, Marks and Spencer does the same thing. This is my favorite part. So what if you're a manufacturing executive? It turns out that in those companies, and I'm guessing you've never heard of all of them, but you've heard of some of them, all those companies are extremely profitable companies, and they treat their workers like human beings. So you probably already know that Starbucks does that Southwest Airlines does that. You may not know it, but it's easy to find that out. They publicize it. These companies pay higher than other companies in their industry, and their people like working there. They're treated like human beings. And it's the opposite of sweatshops, and yet the companies are extremely profitable. There's a relationship between, it's not a one-to-one relationship, but there's a relationship between treating people well and profits in the company. And I used to be a general management prof, and that's one of the things I did a lot of. So there's two companies up there that are stellar. I'm not sure it's on the, it's probably not, but it might be. No, it's not. So Nucor, which, how many of you ever heard of Nucor? N-U-C-O-R, it's a steel company. Top steel company in the world in terms of sales. Or at least it used to be. It's still the top steel company in this country. Very innovative. They hire people, and it's all over the country, mostly in the South. I'm stammering because it's so interesting. They purposely do not hire people with high education. They hire people who have experience in tools, that they're smart people without a lot of education. They build their incentive system so that people can make $100,000 a year just doing mechanical work. It's a little bit dangerous, but that's what it's like. The other one is, I'm going to go back, is Lincoln Electric, and they do welding equipment. They're out of Cleveland, and by the way, they're cases that I taught from. Their people make $100,000 a year. Again, no college graduates. So you're likely to make 40, 50, 60 when you get out. You'll make 100 eventually, most of you, hopefully. But these people do it when they're your age. And again, treated well, treated like real human beings. Sorry, I'm running a little late. Can I do it?
About 5 more minutes.
Okay, got 5 minutes. So I'll be faster. Low pay, no. We're on the case, unsafe conditions, protected. Market executive, a lot of companies push the fact that they're ethical. Patagonia does it, Whole Food does it, Starbucks does it, and it works. There's a segment of the population that buys high-end because companies are good companies. I even know some of those people. Okay, 2 units that you're studying. When this lecture did supply chain, it focused on one link in the chocolate supply chain and one link in the clothing supply chain. There are many links. Supply chains are complicated. The one thing I'd like to point out is especially, well, 2 things. One, the link that we deal with, which is picking and processing the beans, the workers are terrible. Well, after transportation, the next link is actually putting the chocolate together and making the chocolate bars. That's all done in Belgium and Germany, and people work fine. The conditions are fine. In a different way, the people who are making the clothes, that are actually putting the clothes together, that we saw, the people that experienced the fire, their working conditions are terrible. Clothing is sold by people especially in department stores, whose working conditions, given that they're in a nice department store, also lousy. Low pay, pressure, you know, the working conditions are fine, but it's not something you want to wind up doing. You don't want to work for Target anymore. For global studies, I think the point is obvious. Here, we're safe. In almost every job we have, we're safe. Not completely, but it's true. In the world, in the developing world, that's not true for a very, very high percentage of the people. If anybody ever tells you that you're lucky to live here, you are. Done.